Joyce.
Hi, Emily. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good deal. And my little crowd.
Yes, that's called what's the word? Ambience.
Ambient noise.
No, ambiance, you know?
Oh yeah,
Like,
it is ambient. It is He's very proud of himself.
He's
very proud of himself. He surely is.
All right. Well,
so, yeah,
I guess got all of our little doohickeys. I have doohickeys.
Yeah.
I'll send you a test.
Okay. Got it. I'll send you a test back.
Yep, got it.
Perfect. We're good. Oh, we have folks already hearing us.
All right.
Candace, yes.
To present to everyone. I'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started on another webinar in our webinar series from Harmony Equine and Harmony Muzzles. Tonight's lecture is going to be on skin disease in the horse. And we're right in the middle of summertime, the worst time of year for skin disease. And we are going to learn some things that you can do, hopefully a little easier to deal with. We can have skin disease all year long. It's generally worse in the summertime, and that we'll talk about some of the causes, but certainly just the heat of the summer tends to bring things out to the outside. The big issue with treating skin disease is that a lot of our conventional drugs are fairly limited in choices, and they don't always work. In some cases, they work really well, or they work for a few years, and then the situation gets worse. And part of that is the horse's aging immune system. Part of that is that the immune system gets bombarded year after year. The main drug treatment for it is steroids, which steroids have certainly quite a few side effects. And if you have horses that are insulin resistant or Cushing's, steroids can be a fairly dangerous kind of drug to use. Alternative medicine, we have a lot of choices, and that's what we'll talk about here. The interesting thing about skin is we see it on the outside, and so we tend to think that it's an easy thing to treat. But unfortunately, it actually is not, because many of our skin issues that we see are from deep internal immune system imbalances. This is especially true for the chronic problems that come back year after year and get severe. They actually can be very difficult to really heal. And in some cases, we have to make a lot of changes. Sometimes you have to make dietary changes. Sometimes you have to make lifestyle changes. And in many cases, even though we have them under control, we actually have to support them each year with some herbs, with some homeopathics, with some kind of support to get them through that summer season. So we'll talk about allergic skin first, because that's probably the most common. And you can spend a lot of time trying to decide if your itchy skinned horse is allergic or not. But basically, from an alternative medicine perspective, we're less worried about the exact diagnosis that this is an allergic issue, and we're more concerned about the appearance of that skin. So we can see it as raw and bleeding and scratched and open, but we can also have pretty dry, flaky, and itchy skin. We may see more loss of hair and not quite so much in the way of itching. We may see thinning of hair. We may see it in the horse's body, on their head, mane and tail, midline. Just depends on where that particular horse shows the reaction. And just because one horse does it, the mane and tail, and the other horse does their lesions more on the midline, does not really change the reasons behind it and what we're going to do for it. In general, allergic skin is seasonal, though as horses' immune systems get bombarded with more and more vaccines and more lifestyle stress, drug therapy, other diseases, the seasons can get longer and longer each year, to the point where some horses end up with some skin lesions all year long, even though they may have begun with a fairly short season. Other horses stay very seasonal always, and it might just be the months of May and June, or August and September. So what are some of the causes of our allergic skin? The summer heat, as I mentioned early on, is the actual outside temperature is hot, and that helps increase the internal heat in the body. And you can think about that as increasing inflammation. It's an internal heat, the internal heating system in the body, which we talk about Chinese medicine as being too much heat. That comes from the summertime and having heat on the outside. We also, most of the time, it boils down to being an overreactive immune system. And all the horses are exposed to the same plants, the same environment, and yet only some horses have the severe skin reactions. So it's their internal immune system imbalance, their internal immune system that is overreacting, that is causing the skin to itch, which then causes the horse to rub it, which then actually is more irritating, and so you start a vicious circle of itching and opening up the skin, and then letting more and more discomfort come in. We also trigger the immune system with vaccinating too much, and sometime we'll do a webinar on thinking about vaccinations. But the vaccinations stimulate the immune system, and at some point, many times, the immune system just can't be stimulated anymore. It kind of goes haywire. We can have insects as a trigger to this allergy. Sometimes that's called sweet itch. We can have plants. We can have pollens. Lots of plants put out plant oils that horses will react to. So there's many causes, and sometimes you can figure it out by the season or the location on the body as to where it is. So we may have midline dermatitis that shows up along the ventral midline down between the legs, and that's because a lot of the little insects go there. We can end up with it in the mane. We can see welts and lesions on the side of their body where they probably lay down in a plant. So it just depends on the individual horse. We also have a big relationship between the gut and the immune system, because 2/3 of the immune system lines the gut. So if we lose our good, healthy bacteria, then our immune system isn't as healthy, and there's actually a big reflection on the skin. In reality, if you think about it, the lining of the gut is on a continuum with the skin because it goes into the mouth and all the way out to the other end, underneath the tail at the rectum and the anus, and it joins up with the external skin again. So there is a physical relationship between gut health and skin also. So how are we going to go about treating allergic skin? One of the key ingredients to treating any skin allergies, and really almost any skin problems, is omega-3 fatty acids. And those come in the form of flax, hemp, chia seeds. You can also use oil. You can use flax oil. You can use hemp oil. We don't really see much chia seed oil. The issue with the oils a lot of times, though, is that they need to be refrigerated in this hot weather, and that we are experiencing, I think, in the entire eastern half of the United States. And so refrigeration and easy accessibility is important. You don't want to be leaving this stuff sitting out on the counter because it will be unproductive. It actually will, the immune system will have to work harder to deal with the oxidized oils. You can feed whole flax. The horses can chew it quite well. You can usually get hemp seeds with the shells cracked, depending on what country you're in and how easy it is to get the hemp seeds. We also, as we talked about, there's a big connection between the gut and the immune system. So we need to take care of the probiotics and the prebiotics, which are compounds that the horses, or that the good bacteria, like to live on. A couple of my favorites are ProBi by Advanced Biological Concepts and PrePro by Equilite. And we want to be feeding non-toxic food if at all possible. If we can avoid our genetically modified feeds, and you can do that. Oats and barley are non-genetically modified, and Triple Crown as a big company, has a line of non-GMO feeds, because the GMO feeds do actually increase inflammation in the gut itself. So we want to make that as healthy as possible. I find for treating allergic skin that homeopathy is one of the most effective treatments. It's a simple one. It's easy to try, but because, remember I said that skin disease actually can be a sign of a very deep-seated immune system problem. If you've used more than 2 or 3 remedies without seeing good results, you really need to consult with a veterinary homeopath, because there are dozens of remedies. Just looking up something like itchy skin gives you a choice between 100 and 150 remedies, or maybe more. So you have to really pick the right remedy, and if you just keep giving remedies, at some point the body just sort of throws its hands up and it becomes very difficult to treat. Because most of the time with the allergic skin conditions, we're treating a chronic condition rather than just a simple acute condition that would naturally last only a few days. I usually will dose 6 to 8 of the little pellets of a homeopathic remedy, and we'll talk about a couple of those. And I'll give it once a day for 3 days, and then wait. And you want to wait anywhere up to 2 weeks, even 3 weeks, to see if that remedy is really working. You don't want to come in 2 days later and change to a different remedy, because you will find you will not get great results at all. So a couple of common remedies to try. I usually start with the 30C potency, which you can get from our website for many of them. You can get from health food stores. Many health food stores now carry quite a nice selection of homeopathics. So if we've got a couple of different symptoms, because remember, there's all different presentations. If the skin is raw and itchy and it's in the summertime, then sulfur is one of the biggest remedies for that summertime itch, almost anywhere on the body. And it's a very deep acting, very, very, very good remedy. Doesn't work in every case, but it is very helpful in a lot of cases. Rust tox is another, it's a common remedy. We think of it, it's made from poison ivy. And if the horses particularly like warm water on their skin lesions or warm compresses, rust tox might actually work better than sulfur. If you see itchy skin, especially after vaccines, in the springtime, I often will think of the remedy Thuja or Thuja, depending on how you want to say it. And it's sometimes written Thuja like it is on the slide, and then the second word is OCC, and that's all the same thing. Itchy skin in a horse that's nervous, and in homeopathy we really are looking at the whole picture of who the horse is and different little nuances that make this horse unique from the horse in the stall next to him. So if I have a horse that tends to be a little more nervous, tends to be neat and tidy in the stall, I might start with Arsenicum alb as another itchy skin kind of remedy that can be beneficial. We always want to put things onto our itchy skin, and that's fine. Most of the healing is actually going to come from inside, but sometimes we need to do something that's soothing. And sometimes we just want to do something that's soothing. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to realize that most of the stuff you put on is not going to be the stuff that fixes it. So calendula is a homeopathic ointment that you can get at health food stores or on our website. Honey is great, especially when you have raw and open skin. Honey produces an enzyme called glucose oxidase, and it really helps heal that raw, open skin. And you can even dilute it and water it down a little bit. Strong black tea is something else you can mix up, and sometimes just give them a bath in that, and that can help tone down some of the itching. The same thing with chamomile tea. Chamomile tea can be very, very soothing, and you just give them a bath in some tea. Oatmeal baths are also known to be quite soothing, and there are various oatmeal shampoo types of companies, and you can find recipes online to make yourself a nice soothing oatmeal bath, especially for something like that midline dermatitis. A couple of other types of products that can be very useful. You can use various aloe ointments or an aloe gel and put that on. Noni lavender lotion is one of my favorites. Noni is a fruit from Hawaii and those kind of islands. And this company that I use mixes some of that with lavender, which is very, very soothing. And I find that it's quite healing. It's not going to fix a really serious allergic problem, but it's going to go a long ways towards it. You can make up a salve or purchase an herbal salve made with some plantain leaf. We have Hilton Herb, which is one of my favorite herbal companies. They have a Bye Bye Itch lotion that has got several soothing herbs in it, and that can be a very effective topical to use. We also can use, especially if these things that we've been talking about are not working, I will use some Chinese herbal formulas, and those are very specifically prescribed for the type of skin lesion. So you want to find yourself a holistic practitioner, and that's one of the things that I do, is to do telephone consults with people to work out which would be the correct formula. Because with skin, if you prescribe the wrong Chinese herbal formula, you can make it a lot worse, or you can be very ineffective. From a Western herbal standpoint, Hilton Herb also has a Bye Bye Itch as an herbal formula that you can feed internally. And that can be very, very effective for a lot of horses. You can also take some herbs yourself. You can get from a health food store or any herbal collection that you have, and mix up a combination with some nettle and some buckwheat. Maybe add a little bit of chamomile. And garlic never hurts. Horses do very, very well with garlic, and that can help keep some of the bugs away. And there's no harm at all in giving horses garlic. It doesn't keep the bugs away from every single horse, but if it works well with your horse, then it's a great addition to your summertime feeding program. And usually you can purchase garlic for horses. It usually ends up being about a tablespoon of garlic. You can also chop up some of your own garlic if you happen to grow it in the garden. So we'll move on now to scratches and rain rot. And there's all kinds of terminology for these. They're basically lesions where the skin has gotten irritated, and you may have bacteria, you may have funguses. Usually it's bacteria of different sorts that create scabs underneath. We see a lot of rain rot after a drought. And particularly where I live, there's a lot of acid rain. And when there has not been regular rainstorms, you will see the horses almost get burned after a rainstorm. And there the skin is irritated by an external happening, which is the acid rain. It's not an internal problem. Chronic rain rot will come about because of an internal immune system imbalance. Scratches often can show up in muddy or wet conditions, but there are a lot of horses who are very well cared for who have issues with scratches and who are not living in a muddy environment. And that is really more a sign of their internal immune system imbalances. Some of these are very hard to treat, and you can put topicals on those all day long, and they're not going to get a lot better. You really have to treat them internally. So rain rot has these crusty lesions, follows the pattern of usually where the rain goes on the fur. It's usually along the back. The biggest thing is do not wash it and pick at it. I know humans like to do that, but put yourself in the horse's shoes. They don't really want to have all this stuff picked at. It can get quite sore. What we want to do is to treat it internally with some homeopathy, and then as the skin is healing, those scabs will just brush off, and you don't have to pick them and open them up. This is especially important when you have rain rot in the cooler months, because you don't necessarily want to get the horse wet. Tellurium is my most common remedy, and it clears up a very large percentage of rain rot cases. And my backups are a remedy called sepia and then thuja again. And depends a little bit on the individual horse. I almost always will start with some tellurium, and if that doesn't work, I'll move on to some thuja. Sepia I very often use a little bit more frequently on mares. And I'll give the 6 to 8 tabs once a day for 7 days, and then 3 to 7 days, depending on how severe the case is, and then wait before I repeat it. I might wait another 2 weeks, and then if it's not quite all gone, I will repeat that same remedy. If it didn't improve at all, then I'll move on to another remedy. Scratches are usually around the fetlock and pastern. The scabs around there can be thick and painful. Again, do not wash and pick these scabs. If you need to, you can rinse the mud off gently with some plain water. You can actually add a little bit of vinegar to your water, which acidifies the skin, and that for many horses can be helpful. Some of the scratches show up on horses that have white socks, and may be actually related to the interaction of the sun, almost like a a sunburn, or an autoimmune type of condition. And so you really have to go back to treating these internally. So with these, I soften the scabs with an ointment. And the Noni Bio Bandage is the really good one because it's very, very sticky and it's very antibacterial and it will stay in place. Otherwise, you can use something like Bag Balm. Some people use some Desitin or some kind of sticky ointment to just soften the scab, but not try to pick it off. For the remedy, the same sort of deal, the 30C potency daily for 3 to 10 days. My favorite one here, usually to start with, is antimonium crud. That is not a super common remedy. You may or may not find that at your tech shop or your health food store, but it's one of the most effective and can be used in almost any season. Sulfur, we'll revisit this again. It comes into play when the lesions tend to be red and raw and very tender, and not always just in the summer, but especially in the summer. And causticum is another good remedy. Again, not as common a remedy to obtain. And that has, the scabs are usually thick and they have not responded to the antimonium crud. So that's sort of a follow-on remedy. Hives we'll cover quickly because that's often a very simple acute reaction, not like all the other things we were talking about. This can be a simple reaction to a bug bite, to plants they roll in, to topical chemicals like fly sprays. And this can also happen with essential oils. And people will say that essential oils are all natural and very safe, and they are. They're wonderful healers. But there are many horses whose skin is very reactive to the essential oils, and you have to be just as careful using those on a sensitive skinned horse as you do some of the chemicals. We also do have hives that can be chronic and persistent, and those guys usually have a serious immune system repair job that needs to be done. So hives are usually small to large fluid-filled swellings, and they can be small and they can cover the whole body. They can be one area where it looks like they laid on one plant, or they can appear on all of the neck or all of the barrel or on their back. Sometimes they're itchy, sometimes they're sore, sometimes they're not. If they are sore, you don't want to throw a saddle on top of them. If they're itchy, you might be able to throw a saddle on, but you want to make sure that the horse isn't going to buck you off. And if they're not sore and you want to go for a ride, that's fine, because you'll actually sort of help move the fluid through the skin and very often help actually make them dissipate. One of the important things with hives is to test to see if the horse likes warm or cool compresses. So you can either take a bucket of warm water and a bucket of cool water, or you can a warm hose and a cool hose, and see whether they like warm or cool, because that's going to help us decide which remedy to give. So if they like cool, we can use some Apis mellifica, which is a homeopathic, and usually they're going to clear up in anywhere from 1 to 3 days. If it seems to go for a little bit longer, you can dose twice a day, and you may have to go dosing for a little bit longer as well. If they like warm, then Rustox is our remedy with the same type of dosing regime, once or twice a day for anywhere from 1 to 3 days. And that will usually clear them up. And if not, then you may be looking for a little bit more help. So with skin disease, this is just scratching the very top of the surface. There is so much to learn about treating skin. And they can be challenging, but they can be extremely rewarding, and we have a lot of options. Like I said, sometimes too many. If you have 150 remedies to choose from, how do you begin? So we can take some questions. Let's see if I can find my question thing. So anybody who wants to send in a question can do so. Okay, the great question. The sunburn on her nose, and quite a few horses get that. And there are a couple of homeopathics that are really, really useful. One of them is Russ. I don't know if I can type it in. I'm not sure I can even spell it. Russ Ven, V-E-N is the abbreviation. That's one of the best remedies. Occasionally causticum is another good remedy, but those are usually fairly responsive to homeopathics. Sunscreen can be helpful, but it's not always, doesn't always do the trick, as you have found out. Next question is, what is the rash that they get on the front of the cannon bone? I sort of put that into the category of mild cases of scratches. Usually it responds to similar remedies to the scratches. Things like sulfur can be useful. Sometimes, because it's not very reactive, I find that I have to go to other different remedies to actually get it to clear up. What do you recommend for deworming an allergic horse? Primarily insect hypersensitivity. You can, for one thing, with the deworming, which will be a topic of a webinar somewhere along the line, but deworming, the first thing is to check fecals and see whether you even need to deworm. And if you need to deworm, then I tend to stick with the milder dewormers. There are dewormers that certainly can be fairly harsh, things like Strongid and ivermectin sometimes. I'm not a huge fan of it, but we can certainly use that at times. And Panacur are all perfectly valid. You can also deworm using, I have on my website an homeopathic dewormer called Equiopathics, which can be also a very kind way to deworm them. The itchy eyes that are allergy related, I will use things like Eyebright or Euphrasia for itchy eyes, and you can actually get some from a health food store. You can get an Eyebright eye wash that's sort of made for people, but an eyeball is an eyeball, so you can use that for just making an eye wash. You mix it up with some saline for contact lenses, and that usually works quite well. You can also, if you need to, we can treat them internally, but a lot of times they get a little bit irritated. The Eyebright is an herb that works really, really well on their eyes. For horses with Cushing's, would homeopathic remedies interact with medications such as Prosend? No, I use a lot of homeopathy in horses that are on Prosend, and I don't find any problems. In fact, I use a lot of homeopathy to try and help get horses off of Prosend, but there are no contraindications for using it with the drug. Another question on how to treat bug bites that appear as tiny black dots all over. To me, that I would need to know a whole lot more to come up with a correct remedy. You can certainly look at the remedies that we talked about for the allergic skin disease, and it sounds like the horse is overreacting to the bug bites a little bit more than they would normally, and I would think just from this quick question that it would be a little bit of an allergic reaction to the bug bites. Rash on their chest, heat related, anything specific. Rashes on their chest are often insect related. The little flies and the biting gnats will often congregate on the chest, and then they kind of bite at it. They get quite itchy, and that would fall very much under the allergic skin disease type of remedies. And trying to keep as many of the flies away as possible. This is where looking at some of the natural fly sprays, looking at, you can sometimes mix up one of the fly sprays into a little bit of an ointment so that it sticks onto their chest. Same thing is true with the midline dermatitis. Trying to keep some of the insects away does make a big difference. Next question is what's best for sheath cleaning, that's also skin. And the sheath can actually get quite irritated. The best thing for sheath cleaning generally is warm water with maybe just a little bit of a mild soap in it, just a tiny touch, to try and cut a little bit of the grease. There's also, over the years, I've used some of the Excalibur product that you can put up in there and sometimes leave it for a day and soften things up and then come back and give it a good washing. But in general, you want milder things and using water and soaking rather than any harsh chemicals. Will your notes be available? Yes, we will post these things and we'll send you a link to that. I think we've got everybody. Thank you all for coming, and stay tuned for our next webinar.